Get to the church plant! Get to the church plant! Go! Now!
I'm Pete Mitchell, and he's Peyton Jones, and you're listening to Hardcore Church Planting, the companion podcast for the Church Planter Podcast and Church Planter Magazine. Each week, we'll bring you interviews from planters who are in the trenches making it happen right now. These active church planters bear it all, share their successes, their failures, and what they'd wish they'd known when they were first starting out. Listen in to discover how God is working in their church plant. And welcome to the Hardcore Church Planting Podcast. Peyton, introduce our guest.
So our guest today is Ron Edmondson. If you read Church Planter Magazine, you've definitely come across some of his articles. And Ron is a pastor at Emmanuel Baptist Church. He's planted a few churches. He's passionate about leadership, church planting, and he also started a nonprofit ministry called the Mustard Seed Ministry. And you can check out his blog on ronedmondson.com. Ron, welcome on to Hardcore Church Planting.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you having me.
Good stuff.
One of the questions, Ron, that we always like to start out with for our guests who aren't very familiar with you, tell us your story of how you came to faith.
Well, I'm 52, so that I got to stretch a long ways back for that. I grew up in the church. I'm blessed to say, and I know it's a little unusual these days, but my history, my heritage, on both sides of my parents, I can't find a time when we were not people of faith, of the Christian faith. So just always, been very saturated with the church. But when I was 10 years old, we were actually in a revival service. And when I gave my heart to Christ, and I still remember it, you go through seasons in your life where I was young, didn't know what I was doing, but I can go back to that day as if it was yesterday, just the clear understanding of the gospel and just my wanting to be a child of God. So it's just as clear in my mind today as it ever was.
Tell us a little bit about how you got involved with church planting.
Well, it really was by mistake. It wasn't something I was even thinking that I would necessarily do. I was in the business world until 15 years ago. And as a lay person, we saw a need, several of us. I was active in my church, and there was one of the pastors at our church. I was always, friends with all the pastors, and one in particular was much better. He knew the scope of church outside of the world that I was living, which was just Bible Belt, Southern Baptist Church, and he knew what was going on globally with the church. And he talked about churches that were where children were loved to come, and that were so family oriented, and were reaching lost people and all this sort of stuff. And not to say our church wasn't. I grew up in a great church and still love the church today. But honestly, just the structure and the tradition of our church, our boys were there every time the doors were open, but I wouldn't say it was their favorite thing to do, And so he started talking about these churches where kids just love coming. Kids were bringing their parents. And I said, well, let's do that. And he said, well, you just really need to start a church like that. And so we started just kind of talking about the need for a church that reached lost people and families and that sort of thing in our community. And then he moved away, and another guy in the conversation moved away, and I went on about my life as a lay person and business owner. And then several years later, God called me into ministry. Very long story of just surrendering to vocational ministry. And I really thought when I was surrendered to vocational ministry, I'd do more like I had been doing, that I would lead at some organization, some Christian organization, or I would lead retreats or that sort of thing, which I had already done. And the first week I surrendered to ministry, my phone rang, and a pastor of mine, my pastor growing up, called and he didn't know I'd surrendered to ministry. He knew I had always done ministry stuff, but he said, "Would you be interested in helping a church grow again?" This was a 100-plus-year-old church. It would have been his first church out of seminary, and I said, "Well, I'd never done anything like that, but sure, I'd be interested in that." I just surrendered to ministry, and so went to that church to help them just sort of grow again. And I'm a wisdom seeker, so I'm always asking people questions. And somebody I asked, about how do you make a old established church grow again? And somebody said, "Well, I think I would treat it like a church plant." And I said, "Well, how do you do that?" And so I started studying church planting and went to some church planting schools that I could find and talking to church planters. And so we did that. So that's what we did. And then I committed a year to them. They were about an hour from my home. And the last day I was there, a guy was visiting in the back. He called me the next week and he said, "We're trying to plant a church in another city, which is another 15 minutes away. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from my house." He said, "Would you be willing to help us get started?" I said, "Well, I don't have a job and I've done this, so sure, I'll give it a shot." And I committed 2 years to that, and we helped them launch and still a great church today. And you're getting a lot more to the story, but it's a long story. I'm sorry. But then when I was talking to somebody about church planting and getting wisdom in this church plant that we were in. And while I was talking to this one pastor, and he was in a Bible-based church, very strong Bible denomination church or Bible association. So he said, "Ron, I don't know if prophecy exists today, but God has shared something with me, and I need to share it with you." And I said, "Okay." He said, "God seems to be saying you need to finish the dream for the plant He gave you 10 years ago." And that was the one we had originally talked about in our city, in the town I grew up in, that they really needed a church to reach lost people and families. It's just a real strange prophetic time. And so we went back to the church we were currently planning and told them about it. And they said, "Look, you've been very faithful to us. If you want to stay here while you're launching that other one, you can." And so I kept planting the one while we planned the plant for the other. And so that's kind of how I got into it. But it just really snuck up on me. I didn't think I would be where I am today.
Okay, so that's pretty cool. What's your background, Ron? I know you're at a Baptist church now, but you mentioned the term, kind of a prophetic moment. Where are you at in things as far as have you worked with other denominations, or have you always been a Baptist?
I've always been a Baptist all my life. But especially in the last 10 years or so of planting, I've worked with dozens of other denominations. And some of the work that we've done, I've worked with Episcopals planting churches, Anglicans planting churches, Assembly of God. I was just in Germany a couple of months ago working with some plants through the Assemblies of God. And so, we've worked with all kinds of denominations. But as far as me personally, I've been Baptist all my life.
Very cool. We're actually getting ready to interview Sean McCain and Todd Hunter from Always Forward, the Anglican church planting. So that's pretty cool. What was it like planning with Episcopalians?
Well, and really, it's similar to the Anglicans, and it's just it's a matter of, I'm not the planner, obviously. I'm just working with them, giving them suggestions and that sort of thing. But I'm really starting to see some evangelical movement, even within, especially Anglicans, but even within some Episcopals. And so, there's a learning curve for me there, because I don't know a lot of the liturgical stuff that they go through, and even a lot of the denominational hierarchy that they have to deal with. But what I try to do is just break it down to reaching people, because we all do that basically the same. It's through relationships.
Very cool. Very cool. So, Ron, I know you're kind of passionate about things to do with the family. Reading through your bio, I know you run half marathons and marathons. So, I guess really the question for you would be, particularly in light of all the situations where planner health has, pastor health. I mean, all this stuff has been kind of a concern, and high profile leaders have been coming out saying, hey, I really struggle with this. I got it wrong. How do you get it right? How have you learned to survive over the years?
Well, to say I get it right, some days are better than others. We had health assessments at our church today because of for our health insurance, and I went in a little stressed, so I think my blood pressure was a little high at first. So we all have those seasons, and I just interviewed for my blog yesterday, and it'll come out hopefully in the next couple of days, Pete Wilson, who just resigned his church, and I think I loved some of the things that he said, and I think that's what I've tried to practice. But he said when you're in that season where you're out of season. You're not at your best. You're not enjoying the things that you're doing like you used to, and you just can't be there for very long. And so I think one of the things that I try to do is always self-assess. Where am I at? And I'm quick to step away. I would rather step away for an afternoon. If this is just a really bad day, I'm just going to go home and go for a run or go work out or whatever. And I do that a lot of times, maybe an hour or two at a time. But I'd rather step away for a day or 2 days or just get out of town for the week than to lose it for a longer season, So I'm just really careful to self-assess where I'm at and take those mental breaks and those longer breaks. The busier we are as a church, and I say this to pastors all the time, the busier we are as a church, the more I need more time away from the office, not less. And it's just so it's just a constant balancing of that.
Why do you say that you need more time away from the office?
Well, I just have to find my sense of balance again with my wife, with God, with myself, and just my own sanity. Whether that's through reading or running or just relaxation. Jesus told us to, or God told us to do a Sabbath. That's once a week. You just shut down everything, and the Jews were pretty strict about that. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. God knew what He was doing. Imagine that. If I'm going at full pace, I can do that for a while, but at some point I'll just stop. I'm just done. And so before I get to the place where I can't go any further, I want to discipline myself to step back, recalibrate, step back into it again.
Right. So tell us a little bit about when you run and what that means for you and what that helps you to do. Are you praying during that time, or are you just thinking through problems? Is it a mixture of both? And how did you get to a point where you gave yourself permission to do that? Because I think all of those listening are going, well, hey, in the business world, like the business guy can't just say, hey, I'm getting more busy at work. I need to take 2 hours out to run, right? Mm-hmm. Like you can't do that in other lines of work. So I guess really the question is, why is ministry different?
Well, and I would probably push back a little bit on what you just said, and the fact that, I was in the business world a long time, and there are healthy places and there are unhealthy places. And I think the healthy places are especially today, are recognizing the speed of life and just the stress of the world is requiring that we take this time. So I think the business world's responding to that, as a matter of fact. But I think what's different in ministry is, and I'm always hesitant to say that, And the only reason I can say it's different is because I've lived both worlds. We owned our own businesses with, 40, 45 employees in our business, lots of people responsible, looking to us. I served on the city council and as vice mayor of our city. So I understand stress in the secular world. But in the ministry world, I don't know how to describe it, but it just feels like the weight of the world is on you, you never go to bed with a problem solved, with all the problems solved. Never, you don't clock out and go home. There's always that weight, and the other thing I think is important is how the ministry has changed over the years. I'm also working on a blog post. I haven't gotten it together yet, but just how ministry has changed in the last even 20 years. And I use this illustration. The best one that comes to mind is the world of a teacher. No one would argue that the role of a teacher has changed in the last 20 years. The pressures of the classroom today and what a teacher deals with today versus 20 years ago or versus 50 years ago is so incredibly different, just because the problems of society have increased. And it's the same way in ministry. When I first went into ministry, even, it was so much different than the pressures it seems like people are living under. And for a pastor, you seem to live everyone's pressures that are in your church. We've got people right now that can't get pregnant and they're struggling with infertility. Then we got people, they lost a son to heroin a couple of weeks ago, and we got a marriage that everyone thought was wonderful and it's fallen apart. And those are just examples of many, many others. And you carry that weight every single day of everyone in your on your team. When I was in the business world, we had a lot of employees that we were responsible for, and I carried the weight of getting them paid every week. Every time payroll would come around, I felt the responsibility. But I didn't feel the weight if their marriage was in trouble. I had some, and I cared about my employees, and I might walk through them, especially if they approached me. But I didn't know all those. With the people in our church, I'm carrying those every day.
So on top of running, a lot of ministers, pastors, I suppose it depends upon personality, but a lot of us, we've found that a sense of humor is really kind of therapeutic, right? Medical people tell us that it helps relieve stress. There's all kinds of studies on it. I was an RN in a psych hospital, very intense, lockdown ward. They were some funny people. I've noticed when I would do surgery rotations that the surgeons would crack jokes constantly because of the high stress that they're in, having someone's body open and all their blood vessels and internal organs exposed and, centimeter and things go wrong. How do you think that a sense of humor plays into the sanity of a church planner / leader / pastor?
Well, we laugh a lot as a team. I think it does all the things that you mentioned. There's the psychological benefit of it. But the other thing that I think it does is it builds a sense of community among the people on the team and the people that you're working with. I'm wired for progress, and so I use a checklist every day. My meetings back up to one another, throughout the day, and I want to be a productive every day. And yet the most productive part of our staff meetings or volunteer meetings is when in the first 30 minutes when we just have fun together, because it does gel us as a group, and we're more effective together if we've had that time to gel together. So I think it not only is good individually, it's good collectively for the team.
That's good, man. So give us an example of some of the things you say that you guys laugh a lot. What would that look like?
I don't know. It would probably be mostly inside jokes to us. I'm not a fan of cutting people down, but we use a lot of humor. Our worship pastor is just naturally seen as the one who's going to be 10 minutes late, and that's something that's naturally joked about just about every meeting. So it's usually based on individuals and things that would be unique. Probably wouldn't be funny to anybody else unless you're a part of the team.
Gotcha. All right. Well, not Ben, Ron. For some reason, when I was talking to you, I got to thinking of Ben Pilgrim, and I think we met Ben around the same time as you started doing stuff for us. And for the longest, do you know Ben Pilgrim?
I don't know that I do.
We did an interview. We did a whole bunch of interviews, and this is kind of funny. We knew everybody's name except for Ben's. And so Ben, for the longest time, because we lost our contact info with him, we had this video, and he was a bald guy. And that's so when we went to put the title on it, it was Interview with a Bald Church Planter, because this is confession time. We literally could not remember his name. That has nothing to do other than the fact I accidentally called you Ben.
Well, and now you can't not remember his name. So you needed that experience.
I remember coming across again and going, "Oh, that's Bald Church Planter, Ben Pilgrim." Awesome. Okay, so all right. Well, Pete has a question for you, Ron.
One of the questions, Ron, that everyone tunes into this podcast for, at least I like to believe it, is if you were to get into a physical fist fight with Sean Lovejoy, who would win?
That's funny. Sean's a great friend. He would win because I would just yield to him. I just respect him that much.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that's cool. But Ron.
I could take him, and I would make sure he knew that.
I'd make sure he knew it. Yeah. I love that. That's the best part. I'd make sure he knew it, but I'd yield to him.
Brother, I'm going to give you a visual illustration of meekness, power under control.
That's right.
All right. Well, great. Hey, Ron, thank you so much for coming on. You can go to ronedmondson.com, follow his blog. You can also find him writing for us frequently in Church Planter Magazine. And with that, I am going to allow Arnold to sign us out.
Remember, if you are called to church planting, go hardcore or go home.
You've been listening to Hardcore Church Planting. Hardcore Church Planting has been brought to you by the Church Planter Podcast and the Church Planter Magazine, which is available in the App Store for both Apple and Android devices. If you like this episode, leave us a positive review. If you didn't like this episode, we'll be happy to give you your money back.